Good evening and welcome to this virtual leadership talk, sponsored and supported by the Clergy and Lay Leadership Development Team of the Desert Southwest Conference of the United Methodist Church. Now, my name is Michael Edwards, and as a member of the Clergy and Lay Leadership Development Team, I'm privileged to be your host this evening. Our guest presenter today is Pastor Beth Rambikur. She is pastor at Christ Church United Methodist. Pastor Beth was born and raised in Prescott, Arizona. She loves her family, those that birthed and raised her in Prescott, Arizona, those that mentored and taught her in church, school, and life, and those that know her and make her laugh and cry because they share life together. She loves the story of God's work in the world. That is why she is a pastor and has served in churches in the Desert Southwest Conference since 2009. She loves being outside because there is no greater reminder of God's love for creation than his creation itself, draped in a sunrise or blanketed with stars. Finally, she loves learning to live with all the others with whom we share this world. As hard and heartbreaking as that can be, for this is a journey worthy of the greatest love we have. Now, I would say that I met Pastor Beth in 2016 when the United Methodist Churches in Tucson, in the Tucson area, was contacted by Homeland Security about the need to find an organization to help with temporary housing and feeding of families legally entering this country, and assured that they were sent to states across the country to live with their family members. She was at First United Methodist Church and I was at Christ Church. I remember meeting her and immediately admiring her unique communication and leadership skills. With all the challenges associated with this project, it was a successful project that helped thousands of immigrants become reunited with their family members in the United States. That project is still in existence today. Without further ado, I introduce you to my pastor, my mentor, and my friend, Pastor Beth Rambikur.
Thank you, friends, and good evening. It is such a privilege to be with all of you. And Michael, you just about made me teary. So lots of really good memories of back in those days. Holy smokes, wow. So hello, it is a pleasure to be with all of you. My name is Beth. Please feel free to call me Beth. I would love that. And I will admit to you that I'm a little bit nervous, which is very surprising for me because I used to do this all the time. And I do this all the time with my church folks, but I see a lot of them here tonight. So I'm just going to pretend that all of you are my church folks and we're going to be fine. A couple of things about this evening. First of all, out of curiosity, have any of you read Send a Runner? It wasn't required, but I'm just curious if anyone's read the book. Super. Yes. What's great about that is then I can say, all of you should check this book out of your local public library or borrow it from your United Women in Faith group who might have a copy of it circulating. It was on their reading list, I think, last year. Send a Runner. A Navajo honors the long walk. I will say that it is not an easy book, nor is it necessarily a book that's obviously about leadership. So here we go. 6 reasons why I'm picked Send a Runner to talk about as a leadership book for our class tonight. The first one is my understanding of leadership aligns most fully with Howard Thurman's quote that says, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that, because the world needs people who have come alive." In my opinion, this book is about someone, Edison Eskeets, who knows exactly what his passion is, and he does the thing that makes him feel most alive in order to draw attention and to create a new sense of meaning around what it is that he has experienced. So he uses running, something that brings him alive, to raise awareness, to offer healing, to bring community together, to honor stories and lives impacted by the history of the long walk. Now, the long walk, we are not going to dive into deep exploration of Navajo history this evening. We've got Billy Fidlin and our conference resources, who I'm going to share more about those resources with you later to help give you more information on that. But suffice it to say that the long walk was the forcible removal of the Navajo people from the traditional lands of Arizona and New Mexico, Utah, northern southern Colorado, over to the reservation Bosco Redondo, or the Round Forest in New Mexico, Bosque Redondo. So Edison tells the story both of how this event came to pass and also what the impact of that event has been on people living in the Four Corners area. And what I love about this book is that it talks about all the histories that are related to it, not just the Navajo history, though it is told from a Navajo perspective. I also love this book because despite living in Arizona my whole life and growing up here, I had no idea about this history. And I grew up believing in the empty land myth, which I think a lot of us from a certain generation had a perspective that as people moved west across the United States, there were settlements of people, indigenous people, but that most of what we encountered was empty land. Well, that simply wasn't true. We had huge civilizations that were thriving and covered all of the country. And as people moved west, folks were massacred, displaced, and this story tells some of that history. And history is one of the things that lives in our churches. It lives in our communities. It shapes our traditions and our stories and our struggles. It shapes our policies and our practices, even if we don't know it. We might not know what the history is that we keep running up against when we try to make changes in our community or even in our church. But if we learn the history, then we find out why some of those barriers exist. And this is a great overview of some of that history. Also, as people living in the Desert Southwest Conference, which is all of Arizona, I think we're still a little piece of California and Southern Nevada. We have some of the largest indigenous communities in the country living with us. And so it's really important for us to have an idea of who lives here and what their histories are, so that we can understand what has shaped this place that we occupy during this time. And then my second to last reason for picking this book is I love ritual and tradition. And Edison frames his run as a ritual, a ceremony, in order to bring about healing and reconciliation. And I believe that as somebody who practices bringing people into rituals like worship and praise, fellowship and prayer, communion and baptism, the telling of our stories, I believe deeply in the power of ritual to offer transformation, and that all of us have the opportunities to use our practices in ways that are respectful, that offer humility and listening, and that open possibilities for God, creator, whatever it is you want to name that power of creation in the universe, to move us in different directions. So I love that about this story. And finally, I'm using this book because I don't know about y'all, but how many of you are about to go run 330 miles tomorrow? Great, me neither, right? So using a book about running with a bunch of people who are never going to run 330 miles, what are you thinking, Pastor? Except all of us move, right? Even even if that movement isn't walking in any way, shape, or form because we've lost the ability to do so, or we're never born with that ability, we have the ability to move in other ways. And Edison uses movement, the natural human movement of the body, to move and create change and transformation, which is why this presentation is called Changing the World One Step at a Time. So don't worry, none of you are going to go and run 330 miles after this, but you can take whatever that first step is for you, where you are with what you've got. As you're going to discover, I had a lot of fun with the number 6. I had 6 reasons for choosing the book. I have 6 leadership lessons I'd like to raise up from this book. We're going to touch on each one of these leadership lessons, and then I'm going to ask you a question to think about and reflect on, and we'll have just a moment of conversation. I will absolutely share all of these slides with you. So you can have these. You don't have to furiously scramble to write them down. So hopefully that will be helpful. And again, one of the things I hope is that those questions, no matter what that next step is for you on the bigger things that make you come alive, hopefully this will give you some places to think about where to move and create movement in your life. So our first leadership lesson is know, learn, and discover stories or our histories. All of us participate in and are shaped by multiple stories about our families, the stories we share at work or at school, stories we hear on the news, the stories we use for entertainment, or the stories that compel us as members of a democracy to participate in whatever it is we believe in about that democracy, stories about who we are and where we come from, and of course, our faith stories. So Edison is using the 330 miles that he runs from Spider Rock to Santa Fe, which was the seat of government during the time that the long walk policy was initiated, to connect all of the stories around the long walk and what people experienced during that time. He uses this run in a way that allows him to connect these stories with each other. And leadership starts with story, knowing what our stories are that we've inherited, knowing what the compelling stories are that get us to act, and knowing how to respond. That goes back to knowing what our history is. But I'm being really careful about using the word history here, because my experience of this word is people tend to use it like this is the truth about what we've experienced in time up to this point. And as we know, history is also subjective and told from different perspectives. So I'm using the word stories to kind of break us out of the habit of thinking about history as the dominant narrative, but perhaps more as a story that's told from different angles. So one of the questions I have for you is, what are some of the stories, histories that are or may be shaping, say, your church community right now? Or if you're not really active in a church community, then maybe in a community where you are active right now. So I'm going to stop, share, and see. And just briefly, what are some of the stories that are shaping y'all?
Nancy from Shepherd of the Pines. I don't know how you want me to introduce myself. First time here.
Nancy, that was perfect. Thank you.
And yeah, I love Noni too. Love her. I attended once and never left. And now I'm a trustee and so on and so forth, and just absolutely love it. And I'll tell her that you said you love her tomorrow in Bible study. So we just got over, of course, Christmas. So, of course, the Christmas story, Advent. We had the Advent series. I don't know if anybody else did it, but it was the 4 weeks prior to Christmas that led up to Christmas and the birth of Christ. And it was really good. It was very enlightening. It was a PowerPoint presentation, and I cannot remember the name of the man that did it. I'm so sorry. But anyway, Noni shared it with our pastor, shared it with us, and it was absolutely super, and really opened up a lot of question and answer session. Great. It provoked a lot of thought and deep questions and insight into each other, history, and all leading up to the true meaning of Christmas and Christmas Day and such. And so it was really, really good, really, really good. So that's my share on that.
Nancy, that's beautiful. And also a really great example how even if we might not be aware of what the stories are yet, really just getting curious, right? Asking some questions. Why do we tell this story? What does this story mean? Why does the church have the altar in that particular location? Or why is Center Street located on this particular part of the community? Just things like that can help lead us into some deeper stories about what's going on and how our communities were created. One more example anyone would like to share about a story that's shaping you or your leadership in your church?
Yeah, let me say a couple of words. I come from a very different country altogether, so my history is not necessarily a part of the homogeneous history of the United States. So I come from a different background, different rituals, not the core beliefs of a church, but really the history or my story, if you will, is quite different. What I'm used to may not necessarily be what I practice or what is in the United Methodist Church now. The continual evolution of social values may be quite different from the background I came from. So how do you reconcile any kind of changes as you evolve from the historical background will be worth considering also.
Simon, amen, and thank you. Yes, exactly. So one of the beautiful things about this particular book is the weaving together of multiple histories to kind of bring about this big story. But that's something else that's so precious about what it means to live in community with each other, because we discover we come from different backgrounds, sometimes even get to discover we come from different countries, and we bring those traditions in and they shape our understanding of values and social customs, Simon. So beautiful example of how stories can lead to the shaping of who we are and how we are experiencing the world. So some resources as we're considering our stories. I'm like, yeah, right. List some useful resources to help people know what their stories are. This is not an exhaustive list by any kind of stretch of the imagination, but it is a plug for some of the resources. Talking to people in your family or in the community around you, using things like libraries, museums, historical societies. There are people out there who just love history, and that's all they do with their lives, and they can't wait to tell you about it. We have one of those people on staff actually at the conference. Her name is Jennifer Barber, and she would be happy to share with you any history article that you might be curious about or any history she might know about our conference. But then we also have other conference groups. So our leadership and development group has some incredible history about what the conference has gone through in terms of its formation of leadership. Our Native American ministry community can tell us a lot about the different Indigenous communities that are part of our conference. Our churches have groups, and some of us even have church archives and history with all kinds of information. And then, of course, there's trusty Google. And the huge caveat on that is make sure you're checking where the information you're looking up online is coming from. So it's something, if it's coming from, say, the Smithsonian Institute or the University of Arizona, and something else if it's coming from bethscrazyideas.net. So lots of places where we can get resources for discovering stories. Just make sure you're checking what your sources are. Any questions about story? Okay, we shall continue. Next up, knowing ourselves. So what I want to start with is that any kind of undertaking that's really hard and long-term, which all of you probably know because you've lived your lives so far, right? Takes a certain type of knowledge of who we are and what it is we are passionate about, what it is we're good at, and what we are not good at. And I love that Edison uses something that he loves doing, which is running, particularly ultra running, defined as any running of a distance further than a marathon, which is 26.3 miles, I think. Edison loves ultra running, and he uses that to do this historic thing, and to allow him to come alive and draw other people into his experience of aliveness. But most people, while they think that ultra runners are maybe in it for the pain or really crazy, actually, ultra running requires a deep understanding about ourselves, the ability to listen to our body and know exactly what it is that it's telling us, how far we can push, and when we need to back off. And doing any kind of long endurance effort requires us to know what we need in order to take care of ourselves, the kinds of things that work for us. I also love that Edison uses these things that really work for him. He uses a wet bandana for his hydration system. He uses a camp chair from his car to rest in, and he paces his run according to what he knows his body can do. So whenever we're trying to undertake anything, whether it's, kind of reshaping our United Women in Faith, or recruiting people to conference ministries, Judy Martin, I'm looking at you, no, or any of the things that we do kind of on a day-to-day basis, we need to know ourselves in order to be able to lead through those. So the first question that I have here, and I want you all to think for a moment about what this might be, is, what is something you love doing that makes you come alive? So I'm going to stop share, and I'm wondering if there might be just two people who they know exactly what the thing is that makes them come alive that they'd love to share with us.
I love to hike.
Beautiful. Okay, hiking. Excellent. What else? I heard somebody else.
For me, it's Deborah Haddock in Tucson, Christchurch United Methodist. For me, it's going into a classroom of 5-year-olds and reading.
Reading to 5-year-olds.
Reading to reading to kids. That's what I did. I taught for 30 years, and it makes me come alive to be in a classroom of especially kindergartners, and being able to read and see the joy on the face of a young child as they've just caught on to a concept.
Okay, see, I'm coming alive. Two more things that you all come alive around. I want to know more.
I've got to say mine is music and singing.
Oh, fantastic example. Anyone else? You're like, the thing that makes me come alive is super secret and I keep it close. That's okay too. Or it could also be that the thing that I come alive around, I'm not sharing it tonight, right? So we might think, well, how does taking a hike or reading to 5-year-olds or playing music, how do these things help me do something that changes the world? Except that when we do the things that we love doing, they fill our souls, right? And they also sometimes allow us to bring others along, create community, reshape story that lets us live in a different direction. I love this. Okay, so Billy Fidlin shared, bless, I don't have much of a voice due to COVID, but teaching leadership, yes. In the Perryville Women's Prison. So exactly, and I know that makes you come alive because Billy's been one of my mentors for like my whole life. So these kinds of things help us then tap into what we can do in the world and in our church. And so here's the next question that is going to get our brains maybe freaking out a little bit? No, you're not going to freak out. You're going to love this question. How could you use the thing that makes you come alive in leadership? So Billy, you've already named it. You teach leadership in a prison, but as you're thinking about that thing for each of you that makes you come alive, the next step I want you to think about is, what does it mean for each of you to use that thing to cultivate leadership in others? So we're not, anyone want to just jump in and share real fast? Does anyone have an idea? Sure, Nancy.
Sure. In hiking, pretty simple. One step at a time. Don't look at the end point. Just take it one step at a time. Learn and grow. I have a friend actually coming up from southern part of Arizona this weekend, and I said, let's go on a hike. She goes, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I said, oh, this is a simple one. It's real gradual, nothing to be afraid of, one step at a time. We'll come back and have some homemade soup. It'll be great. And she's like,
That's
oh,
perfect.
okay.
That's awesome. So you took her out.
I'm going to this week. She's coming up Friday. Yeah.
Okay. Exposing somebody to a brand new place where they ask questions about, what is this? What are these trees? What kinds of birds? All of that enhances our knowledge of the world that we're living in. That's leadership. So I want all of you, your challenge, should you choose to accept, is to continue to think about those things that light your fire, that get your passion going, that draw you into that state of aliveness, and keep asking, how can I incorporate those into leadership? How can I bring others along into this thing I love doing? And then the last question I have with that is, what are some practices of self-care that you need to take in order to continue to sustain those things that give you aliveness and that make you feel good? Because all of us, like, if we could just do the one thing we're passionate about all the time, it'd be great, right? But most of us, maybe we do it 10% of the time. Maybe we do have the privilege of doing it all the time, but we know that when you do the thing you love, you're also working, and that's hard. So you've got to keep yourself well. So the challenge for this is, think about the things you need to do in terms of self-care. And I know you had a leadership talk on that a couple of months ago. So go back and reference Reverend Lynn Bartlow's conversation on that for really good information. Okay, so next one is, no one goes alone. And I love this one, because a lot of times what we hear in leadership stories is kind of the story of the lone wolf, right? A person rises up out of a community or out of devastation, and it's just one person who's just changing everything. And that's such nonsense. It just doesn't happen that way, right? Like, even Jesus had a community of support people who were around him. When you do athletic endeavors like Edison does on this, you have something called a crew. These are people who have the food, they've got the water, they've got the chair. They're going to drive their car with you and keep you protected, at least in Edison's case. In other kinds of efforts, right? Those are our families, our pets, our friends, our teachers, our coworkers, covenant groups, church or volunteer groups that we can draw support from. And so whenever we're considering heading out into leadership, or what it is we're going to do with leadership, the question we need to be asking ourselves is, who is my support network? Not just for the day-to-day leadership stuff we have to do, but then when you take those really big risks that ask you to step out beyond your comfort zone, right? That ask you to do whatever the equivalent of running 330 miles is for you, what is the support network you need to do that? And for Edison, it wasn't just knowing the people who traveled with him. It was having organizational support, business leaders, colleagues, and foundations that were able to give him the kind of support he needed to do this effort. And for us, we might ask the same thing. If it's a project you want to undertake in your church, who are some of the other leadership groups you need to bring along with you? What are some of the other conversations? Who, from the broader network of our connection in the United Methodist Church, right? We talk about connection. Who can we draw in? Who can give us the skills we might need, or who can advise us? who can give us really good wisdom when we maybe step off the path and say, hey, that's an interesting step. Are you sure you want to do that? Those people who can help course correct for us are also really good support people. So my questions for you guys are, I know I already said them and I've already forgotten. Who is your crew for your day-to-day life? And then what support network might you need to build to make those larger dreams happen? So anybody want to share just really quickly, who's an example of somebody who supports you in your daily life? I see Paul and Dot Wagaman pointing to each other. Well, that's convenient. That's perfect. One more example somebody might want to share support.
Definitely my husband.
Perfect, Jeannie. Excellent.
I'll say,
Judy.
I'll say support. It depends on what I'm doing. What's interesting is I always seem to have my hands in a lot of different things, and my corporate life, a lot of people didn't understand what I did, right? So my grandfather always thought I worked for a whole different company, could never remember the company name, it's like, and he thought I ran it, it's like, no, it just, so like, he wasn't going to be that person, right? So you have to, depending on what you're doing, I think, develop people that can support you and understand what you're doing or what you need support for. So building that's a critical part of being able to continue your 330-mile journey.
And Judy, that's such a potent example, because truly the different things we try to undertake do take different kinds of support, right? I would never ask my triathlon coach for advice about running a church council meeting. And I probably wouldn't ask my church council chair for advice on how to swim 2 miles. Although I don't know, Dawn, maybe I should try that. So different kinds of support networks, right, are going to give you information on different kinds of things. And it's important also to keep that in mind. And sometimes it can be a little cool and quirky to shake things up and bring a question to one of your mentors who you might not necessarily always ask, and see, okay, Dawn, what do you think about swimming 2 miles? What would you do to start? I'm not actually asking, bless you, my friend. Any other examples of what you might need to do to build your support network? Does anyone have an example of what they might need to do? Yes, Penny or Jeannie. Penny?
Yes, I used to teach teachers to teach, and I used to teach leadership as well. And I think a word that always comes to mind, which I can segue on to what Judy was saying, whether it's a husband or whether it's a different group, look for your collaborative people that you can zero in on, and they're going to have the most empathy for whatever your goal is. And they also have great ideas. So the old adage, more than one head is always an advantage. So I think that collaboration is a really big word to remember for leadership. Surround yourself with other very competent people who can empathize with your goal.
Penny, outstanding point. Thank you. Yes. And collaboration is such a good word too. It's so, it's good. Okay. So yes.
So I have a question. That point about empathy and collaboration, that is the ideal situation. In real life, you'll be lucky to get a team aligned in thought and philosophy, opinion, and so on. I am in a finance team. I'm fortunate enough to have people of like-mindedness and to the point of group thinking. Even that's fine. But in the real world, unfortunately, people may not be all aligned in the same way as a leader might want them to go. So often you may be running into some difficulties as well. So the leadership will come when you can bring them along for the greater good of the team and the greater good of the organization.
Amen, Simon,
What
right?
What I was going
Michael,
to say, Pastor Beth, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you.
I don't
We can
know.
hear you, Michael.
I think I might be losing the signal because everybody looks like they're frozen there. Can you? Well, Simon, I just want to speak to something that you said, because one of my gifts is to, I have a vision on things, and I sleep on thoughts, and I get information from God, and one of what really makes me happy is when I'm doing a project. I have an engineering background, so I'm very logical. When I'm doing a project and something comes together in my head, periodically, it may be throughout a week, it may be a month or whatever, but it comes together. And then I know it's going to work. But finding people that believe in what your gifts are is not easy. So I struggle with that in leadership sometimes. I remember this last year when we were looking for what to do when COVID came, and we couldn't meet together, and people were masked up, and they were like, "Oh, let's have an outdoor service," and they have people sit in their cars. And some people had the idea, okay, we'll put Pastor Beth on the back of a pickup truck and have her speak. And initially came to my mind, I said, you know what, I can build a platform and with steps, and then we can go up. And it's like, nah, a lot of people, no, let's just put her in the back of a pickup truck. I said, I can do this. And I put some plans together and just started building, and people came along, and I got Anthony, my son, to help, and we built that platform, and we had services outdoors, and it was wonderful, So I understand what you're saying, Simon.
Yeah. So two really good points, right? What do you do when opposition is surrounding you and there's kind of, it's like we're butting heads to move forward, and then you're playing the long game, right? You're listening to the bigger story that maybe you can weave each other in together. And sometimes you do take that lone wolf step and you do the first part of it, and then you call somebody else to come along with you, and you kind of put the next piece in, and that you've got that maybe at home family support that's going to be like, we've got you no matter what those people in the community are going to think. So great examples of times of what you do when moving together with your team is actually not happening because A, you don't have a team, or B, the team has a different vision. Great examples. Thank you. All right, so taking it, that kind of segues into the next piece that I drew out of this book, which was taking it one step at a time, taking it 2 miles at a time, taking it 1 day at a time. So what I really appreciated about Edison's journey is that he doesn't run 330 miles in 1 day or even 1 week. He runs it 1 step at a time. And he knows that he needs to take a break every 2 miles, and he stops every single day. And what I have come to learn from kind of observing people who do ultra running is that people they do what they can do, and then they stop and they rest and they take breaks, and they have people who can help support them. And if they're doing longer races, they take the time they need to take, that they can take, to recover. And what I draw from that is a lot of times the big projects we're looking at doing, it's like, how are we ever going to do that? I remember, I wasn't going to share any personal stories, but one of the big personal stories about failure that exists in my life is the bishop asked me to be the director of Connectional Ministries. And he was like, and you're going to change our conference culture. And I remember thinking, oh, okay. how does a single person do that? Well, friends, I'm here to tell you that one single person cannot do that, but also that those big processes of change happen by learning the stories, pulling people one step at a time, learning about one project, taking that project, getting it done, and then moving to the next one, and deploying the incredible people you have working around you to do the things that have brought them to life. So I can tell you that sometimes when we undertake leadership projects, we want to say, I'm going to eat this elephant all at once. But the truth is, you got to do it one bite at a time. And what I love about Edison's book is, again, it's just one step at a time. And he stops every 2 miles. So one of the questions from this is, what is one, and this one is more for personal reflection, but if you've got one that's right on the tip of your head, share it. What is the one next step that you need to take in your leadership journey? What's that one next movement or next mile or next skill that you need to put in place to move forward in your leadership journey? See, Nancy?
Yeah, I would say stepping out of your comfort zone would be for me. Expanding my horizons. I know that's cliche, but true. Not just pairing with someone you're always so familiar with, or that you work with, or you do other activities with, but someone or people, namely my Bible study group, and sharing more in there, and branching out from there, and expanding my what would be my support group, expanding my support group. That is my support group now, and they are fabulous, and we do share with each other openly. It's great. We have about 12, 14 people a week, so it makes a really nice group of people, and we're constantly trying to expand that. So I need to get out of that comfort zone and start inviting more people, and because the more people you have, the more they share, the more they feel comfortable, and you grow from them and they grow from you. Thank you.
That's a great example. And often that place of discomfort, if there's something that's niggling at you, or that feels really big, or kind of keeps popping up in your mind and makes you feel uncomfortable, it could be that that is your next leadership step. And it also could be that you don't necessarily know the skill you need to have to take that next step, right? Which is exactly what then you need to use that support network to do. And you've got great people. I'm looking at 20 incredible people who can all offer awesome experience in terms of helping connect to resources for taking whatever next step might be coming for you. So please take advantage of folks like Alberta and Judy and Billy and Michael to be able to take next steps. So, okay, be my fifth leadership step. We're almost there, friends. You have almost finished running this 330 miles with me. You're being awesome. Thank you. Our next leadership question is, or lesson is, be real. Name reality as you're experiencing it. What I really appreciated about this book is that Edison and Jim, who is helping narrate the bigger history of what's going on with the Navajo, are real about what happens. And they are complex and tragic histories that made me squirm and feel super uncomfortable and say, how is it possible that these policies were in place and that, my ancestors were responsible for things like this? How can this be? And then it made me squirm to ask the question of, like, what is my responsibility in being held accountable for that? And how do I name what I'm experiencing? And I love that all along the way, Edison is real about what he's experiencing. my toes hurt, right? My ankles hurt. It's hot out here. I see all kinds of struggles that take place in this way. And he doesn't do it in ways that are hyper emotional or that point fingers, but he does do it in ways that draw us closer in and create space for us to ask questions. What does it mean that this person is experiencing reality in this way? Another challenge is that, and Simon, you alluded to this, right? We live in a world where people have multiple different perspectives. So me naming the reality that I see doesn't mean that that's the reality that even one of you is going to see, or that somebody else sharing my community is going to see. All of us are going to share from different perspectives. And some of what leadership is being able to hold all those different perspectives together and weave them into a new type of story that allows us to move the narrative forward, to take that action next step. So some of the questions I have for you, this one is actually an interesting one and kind of gets personal, but what is something totally unique about your perspective on the world? Having awareness of the lens that we're bringing to things can be really, really helpful. And each of you has a totally unique perspective. So I would invite you to kind of step back and think about what's that one totally unique thing about me that nobody else has that shapes the way that I see things. Does anybody have anything there they want to share?
I'd like to just say that in the whole situation of experience and then how it goes into our leadership of experience and the reality of stories, I think that as leaders, we need to pace ourselves a little bit, not only for self-care, but for the others we're working with. And we need to take a moment and hear their histories, because that's what creates their responses. And as a good leader, we have to know why one person responds with a knee-jerk response to certain things. Another person is the negative person all the time. Another person is the go-getter that you have to pull back. And I think we have to understand, as a responsible leader, some of their history, so that we can be tolerant and that also we can help negotiate that piece of our leadership. So there's a pacing. And I know I have to be careful because I get excited. I have a lot of passion, and I came from two immigrant families on both sides. They were very different. One was very analytic German family, and the other was a very demonstrative, loud, gregarious Italian family. So as a child, I had to negotiate different worlds and different languages. And I think that as a leader, we have to do that. We have to negotiate worlds and people and their history.
Beautiful points. And being sensitive, I love that. Negotiate different worlds. That is 100% what we do as human beings walking around through our lives every single day, right? So bringing sensitivity to that fact as we're encountering other people and taking a moment to pause. I love that, the pacing, slow down. Why am I responding this way? For me, why am I speaking so fast, right? But also, why am I bringing this emotion into the situation? What's happening here that's creating this thing that I'm telling myself, that I'm narrating, that I'm creating? And what could be going on for that person? So beautiful example, Penny, love it. One other thing that's unique about perspective, or one insight you would share on this leadership lesson?
If the team members do have conflicting views, as a leader, I don't think I should impose my view as the only one. In other words, I've seen so-called successful managers or leaders who claim my way or highway, but that should never be. And you should be able to assimilate the opposing views or different views and come to a consensus. Usually that will be better.
Beautiful point. Thank you. And I would say that's something Edison does as well, right? He's like, this is the thing I'm doing to address this piece of history that I've experienced. But he's not at all saying, and all of you, the solution is running 330 miles, right? That's no. And even more than that, he never once says, and I speak with authority on how all Navajo understand the long walk, or I can share what this history means for everyone. No, he says each of us have to encounter what this story, what this road means for us and interpret it. And Simon, exactly. Good leadership then is holding those stories together and bringing those perspectives out. So the very last leadership lesson that I want to land on today before we end our my favorite part of the whole book, which is that actions matter. And in some cases, actions perhaps matter more than our words. Edison and Jim raise multiple times the kind of broken words of the US government, that US actors would say, we're going to do one thing, and then would completely betray treaties and contracts, or would act completely contrary to what their words were saying. And so when Edison decides to do this, he decides to do a run because it's an action. And everything he does along the way are actions. He uses a rattle to accompany the run. He uses prayer. He uses the action of running itself to remember and cast into the future. He uses a ritual at the beginning that allows him to remember the story of the land and all the people who are part of that land and all the beings that are part of the land, because as humans, we tend to be a little bit, I don't know, anthropocentric. Is that the word I'm looking for? We think that ours is the only perspective that matters, but we share this world with tons of other beings, lots of other life forms whose experiences also matter and who we have a tremendous impact on. And even the dedication that he speaks in his book is for the great ones. We survived, we sing, we speak, we dance into our journey as one. And all of these words are actions. At the very end of his run, Edison uses one of the traditional actions of mourning to cut his hair, a ritual of mourning in order to close the ceremony of this run. And as is pointed out, no one person can interpret what that meant for Edison or what that means for us, because all of us are, again, using our different perspectives, but this action matters. And so I am a person of faith, but I believe that faith needs to be an action. And I think one of the great tragedies of kind of Christian history is that we took the word and turned it into words rather than into action. And I believe that Jesus is constantly calling us into ways that ask us to take action, to create wholeness, to expand love, to offer forgiveness, to practice grace. But we get caught up in words, how we write them, how we sing them, the best way to use them on signs. And we have to consider, as people of the living word, what it means to turn our words into actions. So our actions might not be running 330 miles, but as we asked before, kind of what's the next step your aliveness or leadership will need to take, given what it is that you're facing now. So I'm gonna stop there. What anyone have a kind of a next step in mind, or an action that you're just dying to take? Maybe you're not dying to take it, you're dreading taking it.
I just need to continue when I get an idea. But first of all, I'm chair of the Covenant Council at Christ Church. And when I get an idea of something that I think might be good for our church to move into, and I think I need to talk to Karen, or I need to talk to Harold. then I need to act on that and not just write it on my to-do list. And I have done that in the past at times, and it's usually beneficial. So this word of taking action speaks to me in the sense that, all right, you know you can do it, go ahead and do it again and follow through on some of your ideas.
Amen, Don. Yeah. Others, actions.
I found the book online, free through the library online through Kindle and Libby, and I just checked it out, so I'm going to read that. So that's moving in a new direction.
That is a fantastic next action, Nancy. You're making my heart sing. Yes.
When it comes to leadership, sometimes I tend to be I will be the first to say, I'm a bit of a control freak. And so I find sometimes I have to remember that there are other ideas, there's other ways, and you need to get that feedback. And I run this mantra through my head in the, I want people to understand and respect my viewpoints and the way I think of things. But in return, Deborah, you have to understand, respect, and accept what others are feeling in the culture. And I know that about myself, but I know that's something I need to work on. And that's an action I need to take personally, is to let go and let others help. And I bought the book today, by the way.
Yay! Alberta.
Well, Jeannie Hughes and I have been working on something for the past year, and I think it's going to come to fruition in the next week or so. So we've been, it's been something we've been really struggling with, and I think it's about to work.
Praise God. We're sending prayers to you, Alberta, that this action comes to fruition. My friends, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share with you some of the lessons that I have drawn from Edison's book, and some of the ways that this narrative has shaped my understanding of leadership. And even more than that, what I appreciate is learning with all of you. You all have incredible wisdom and your own experiences of leadership. And if there's kind of that one overarching thing that I take from Edison's book, it's that all of you were given into this world for your aliveness to bring that passion to places that can change the world. But it takes us going one step at a time to get there. So be bold, take the next step, use your support networks, and read the book. It's hard. It's really heartbreaking, and it is so good. But also be yourselves and lead on. So thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Pastor Beth, for your interesting topic. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else has enjoyed our presentation.